Welcome back to the channel. This will be the team selection for Matchday 9 in UCL Fantasy, where we have unlimited transfers and the ability to pick 4 players from the same club. We'll get 2 free transfers for Matchday 10, the second leg of the knockout playoff rounds, and then unlimited transfers once again for Matchday 11 as we approach the round of 16. All of the transfers and the best time to use the limitless and the wildcard is covered in my chip strategy guide. And if you also check out my best team for Matchday 9, you'll have the full coverage for UCL Fantasy this week. And it will be concluded on Tuesday by tuning into the deadline stream where all of your questions will be answered. Be sure not to miss it by smashing the like button of this video and subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell in the process. Let's get this video in particular to the 200 likes, and we're very close towards 32,000 subscribers as our next milestone. Check all the links in the description below for my X, Instagram, Blue Sky, the Discord server, UCL Fantasy League, and much more. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. It has been less than 2 weeks since Matchday 8, but it's time to refresh our memories a little bit with this review of the last game week. And I had a big decision to make. Do I play the wildcard or make transfers? And in the end, I took a -4 hit, which involved a goalkeeper move, as both of my options there didn't play. In the case of Alisson, he didn't travel with Liverpool's squad to PSV in their 3-2 loss there, as Liverpool heavily rotated, and Di Gregorio was benched for Perrin in their 2-0 defeat against Benfica. So in the end, to prevent going down to 10 men from the get-go, I went for Jan Sommer, who is a very safe pair of hands to say the least. Inter Milan have conceded 1 goal in this competition, which came against Bayer Leverkusen in a 1-0 loss earlier this season. They have qualified directly, and they've got arguably the best defence in Europe. And Jan Sommer was maybe a bit fortunate, you could say, or at least those that went for him, because Monaco went down to 10 men, which all but assured that clean sheet, and I'm very happy that that was the case. My defensive line was definitely the best part of my team, by the way, because Frimpong, one of my transfers in, got 9 points, and that was matched by his partner in crime, Grimaldo, who also got 9 points as well. And Kim Min-jae didn't keep a clean sheet, but still delivered 5 points overall. And in the case of this defensive line, returns from every single one of them. There were some disappointments, however, in the midfield and forward line. So 2 blanks there from Elise, who was my third and final transfer, and I meant benching somebody who actually outscored him from the same game. Gittins with 3 blanks in a row in the Champions League. He's doing fairly well in the Bundesliga, scoring and assisting on quite a regular basis, but I just haven't been able to catch his returns in UCL Fantasy this season. But I did captain Florian Wirtz, who got 13 points as his baseline score, so I captained my highest scoring player, and I'm very happy that was the case. Otherwise, it would have been a red arrow. And last but not least was Rafinha, who got 2 assists in that 2-2 draw against Atalanta. And Barcelona have been in great form in La Liga. They're slowly creeping up on both Madrid clubs in a 3-way title race there in the Spanish division. So I'm very happy with Rafinha and Wirtz, but the other 2 were very disappointing. And I have to say, Elise played very well, but couldn't translate that performance into goals and assists. And that's been the case in the Bundesliga in recent matches as well. But my forward line was so underwhelming. I had Haaland, Mbappe, and Alvarez with very good fixtures, by the way. And Alvarez played less than 60 minutes. He got the assist early on, but was subbed off around 57 minutes. Mbappe missed 4 big chances against Brest. So ultimately, if I went for Vinicius Jr. back in Matchday 7, I would have had a suspension going into Matchday 8, sure, but I would have had more points between both matchdays combined, despite the fact that Vinicius Jr. missed out against Brest entirely. He'll be back from suspension now, of course, for Matchday 9, and he had another suspension in La Liga recently, which has been served. He is now available in that competition as well, but I think in the Champions League, Vinicius has been far better than Kylian Mbappe. As for Erling Haaland, facing Club Brugge at home, who took the lead early on, Man City made the comeback, but Haaland wasn't able to get on the score sheet, so he ultimately blanked, and that was very disappointing. As for my bench, the only kind of gripe I have is benching Joshua Kimmich, because if I didn't take that -4 hit for Elise and just started Kimmich, I would have been a few points up, but it's really nitpicking. It was still a decent week for me overall, and I'll take it. The rest of my players on the bench blanked, so that also helps a little bit when you don't see too many bench points like I usually do in FPL. But I got 75 points for the game week, which includes that -4 hit I took. So my rank went up by around 4,000 places, from 36k to 32,000 in the world, which isn't great, but it is progress. And I'm looking to break into the top 10k fairly soon, which I've done very consistently throughout the years in UCL Fantasy. And now with unlimited transfers, there are a lot of possibilities for my Matchday 9 team. Now, you could argue that the pool of players is very limited at this stage of the competition, but it won't be as bad as the semi-finals or the Champions League final between match days 15 and 17, where you've only got a few amount of teams left in the competition, and only 1 or 2 differentials can really bail you out, really. But in this stage, you've still got multiple teams left trying to qualify for the knockout stages. 8 teams in particular will qualify, of course, so we can still go a bit different with some of our picks, and you'll see towards the end of this video, there's actually quite a lot of players that could make the cut, so it's going to be very difficult to determine that ultimate 15-man squad, but I think I've done it with this draft, and I will discuss all the players you should consider from each team, because some of you might back PSV to beat Juventus, for example, and want a differential from that squad, so that will be covered in this video and also the deadline stream. But let's talk about some of my transfer plans, which could involve a like-for-like switch, so to speak. Kylian Mbappe out for his teammate Vinicius Jr., who has 20 more UCL Fantasy points this season and multiple double-digit returns, whilst Mbappe has been able to get 5 or 6 points on the odd occasion, but he's also blanked a lot of times, so his record in the Champions League has been very underwhelming, but the 4 big chances he missed against Brest might be indicative of a very big haul coming up very soon, so it might be the wrong time to get off him. He scored in the Madrid derby over the weekend in that 1-1 draw there, which is going to be very crucial for that title race, but I think Vinicius is the better pick in UCL Fantasy. That could change, of course, and there's a certain Rodrigo who is going massively under the radar, and in recent meetings with Manchester City, it was Rodrigo coming up clutch with some very important goals there for Real Madrid, so he could be another great option. You ultimately can't go wrong with any of these Madrid attackers. The same goes for Bellingham in the midfield. But another transfer I'm looking to make in the forward line includes Erling Haaland out for Harry Kane. I'm quite bullish on Real Madrid going through, but ultimately that's not too relevant. It's about getting the points in match days 9 and 10, which Haaland could certainly do even if Man City were to be eliminated. But I would favour Harry Kane with the fixtures against Celtic home and away. It does start with a trip to Celtic Park, which can be very tricky even for the best teams in Europe, and Bayern Munich have 9 wins out of the last 10 matches. Harry Kane scored a brace of penalties over the weekend, whilst Haaland got a full rest, to be fair, against Leyton Orient in the FA Cup, where Man City went down actually, but they ended up winning the game 2-1. So I just think Bayern Munich are in better form overall. They've got a more appealing opponent, and Real Madrid, despite some of their recent struggles, are still top of La Liga and one of the favourites to win the Champions League this season. So with these transfer plans in mind, this is how my team could line up for matchday 9, and I've made so many changes here. Only one player stayed from my original squad from matchday 8. Donnarumma between the sticks is my favourite Tuesday goalkeeper, and PSG are actually top of the clean sheet odds, which I'll show you very soon, but I'm not so sure about that. If I'm personally backing one team to keep a clean sheet, that's going to be Atalanta this week, and that's why I've actually got multiple defenders there from their team, and that includes Carnesecchi in goal, who I'll talk about as well, because he is actually a doubt going into matchday 9, and we could see Rui Patricio, a 4 million goalkeeper, take that position instead. But I've gone for Hakimi to form a PSG defensive double-up with Kim Min-jae and Gatti, a very solid defence in my opinion, and Juventus have drawn so many games this season, only the 1 loss in Serie A. They're very tough to beat, but I have to say going for 2 or 3 Juventus defenders or players is probably a bit overkill, despite the fact that PSV might be there for the taking. These two sides met back in matchday 1, where Juventus won by a 3-1 scoreline, and it was a late consolation goal for the Dutch side, which wiped out that Di Gregorio clean sheet. He's another one you could go for at 4.2 million if you want that Tuesday goalkeeper, but I've been burned by Di Gregorio before, so I'd probably rather go for another Italian, this time with Donnarumma. Kim Min-jae is the only player to have stayed from my matchday 8 team. He's a ball recovery machine, and he has produced some massive returns this season, including 16 points against PSG back in late November, and that was PSG's last defeat across all competitions. They're in amazing form at the moment, and they fully rested Hakimi this weekend in a 4-1 win over Monaco, so I think he's well poised for a decent return here in the Champions League. And PSG have a great record against Brest, with 9 wins and 1 draw out of the last 10 matches, but no clean sheet in the last 6 games, so I think the attackers will be in a great position to get some points here, and perhaps Hakimi with the goals and assists threat he poses. But in terms of tripling or quadrupling on the PSG defence, I think that'd be overkill, despite how the bookmakers kind of really back PSG for a clean sheet in matchday 9. But I would certainly advocate one PSG attacker at the very least, and Dembele is the most informed attacker in the world right now, with 13 goals in 7 matches in this calendar year. I'm not going to say he's essential, but he is a mega differential who can really push you up the ranks in your mini leagues, and if you're maybe targeting a specific rank by the end of the season, I think Dembele is a great pick even for the Tuesday captaincy, which I'll talk about very soon. I'm also going for Barcola, who got an assist against Monaco, but Dembele scored a brace and he's got multiple hat-tricks in 2025. Musiala and Bellingham complete the midfield with relatively difficult fixtures, especially in the case of Bellingham on paper, but Man City shipped 5 goals to Arsenal and they aren't keeping any clean sheets at all. They're decimated at the back with injuries, and although some players are returning from injury and Real Madrid themselves have a lot of issues themselves, particularly in their defensive line, you'd still back a high-scoring game with both teams scoring multiple goals, and Bellingham is getting goals and assists on a very consistent basis. With Bayern Munich, you might want to double up on the midfield with Elise and Musiala, but it's Joshua Kimmich who has been outstanding recently with solid performances week in, week out, and I had him in Matchday 8 and I benched him, of course, as I showed you just a few minutes ago, but he's another one that could be a very decent option, especially as an enabler, and you want to maybe maximize your other midfielders or the forward line. Speaking of which, I'm going for some big hitters in this position, which includes Guirassy, Kane, and Vinicius Jr., but there are so many options like Gyökeres, who returned from injury in a 1-1 draw against Porto. You've also got the likes of Mbappe, who could still do really well against Man City, and if he gets 4 big chances like he did against Brest, he'll probably deliver 1 or 2 goals at the very least. Not to mention Rodrigo, who is a mega differential, Kolo Muani, who has 5 goals in 3 games since joining Juventus from PSG. There are so many different options from different teams. Let me know your favourites down in the comment section below. I won't claim that this front three in particular is locked in, but I'm very happy with these players in isolation. Guirassy hasn't blanked in the Champions League this season, and I sold him a couple of weeks ago in UCL Fantasy terms because he was an injury doubt, and he actually came off the bench and outscored my replacement at the time, so he's just been phenomenal. But Borussia Dortmund have 5 losses out of the last 8 matches across all competitions. They are in free fall, sitting 11th in the Bundesliga, but one of the shining lights of their season is Guirassy, who essentially scores week in, week out, particularly in the Champions League. Harry Kane is doing extremely well in the Bundesliga. Not so much in the Champions League, though. I think we need to see an improvement from him there. He had a great start in Matchday 1, but has kind of tailed off ever since, but he is still a really good option against Celtic. I would back him to score a couple of goals across both legs, but Celtic away might be more difficult than some people expect. That's the way I'm kind of seeing it right now, but you would expect Bayern Munich to qualify to the next round. And Vinicius Jr. has done well against Man City in the past, although Rodrigo has been even better in recent meetings, and he's got that X factor in the Champions League, which kind of raises his level, and Real Madrid get over the line, even in the most difficult of circumstances. We've seen this matchup so many times in recent years, but it's still going to be very interesting on paper, with both clubs struggling, particularly in the case of Manchester City, and hopefully we get the goals that were kind of promised with both defensive lines just decimated by injuries and also looking terrible in terms of tactics and other factors coming into play. As for my bench, I've got Carnesecchi, who is an injured out right now. Let's see the lineups in terms of the squads that are announced over the next couple of days. So if we see that Carnesecchi is not called up to the Atalanta squad, go for Rui Patricio because he will start at 4 million. But if Carnesecchi travels with the Atalanta squad, then I'd probably just take the chance with Carnesecchi there. I would back him to start over Rui Patricio if that was the case. So on the Monday, at the time of this recording, of course, later on, when this video is published, we should see these squads announced, and it will all be covered on Tuesday in the deadline stream as well. I've also got Pulisic, who got 2 assists off the bench in a 2-0 win over the weekend, and I've also got Hayne and Zappacosta to cover that Atalanta defence. So I've got a triple up right now with Carnesecchi or Rui Patricio, and then 2 defenders there. Kolasinac is out for the next couple of weeks, and Lookman, who was actually one of my favourite options for matchdays 9 and 10, it looks like he could be unavailable, and there were some updates provided by Gasperini, the Atalanta manager, on several players, which includes De Ketelaere, and he said the following: he took a blow to the calf and I preferred not to risk it further, so we'll wait and see if De Ketelaere is available to play in his native country of Belgium against Club Brugge. And he also gave updates on other players. With Carnesecchi, he didn't really give much away, unfortunately. He said we will see for Bruges, and he wasn't out today because of the fever. With Lookman, Gasperini said he took a strong contusion from Naples. I don't know if he can play on Wednesday, which doesn't seem very optimistic, but there is still a slim chance, I would deduce from those statements. And with Kolasinac, he said he has a muscle stretch, which in recent months have persecuted him. On Wednesday, there will be no chance. And these are kind of roughly translated from Italian to English, so maybe don't take it word for word exactly, but that is the kind of general sense we get with all of those players and the updates from Gasperini. But let's talk about the captaincy, which might be very interesting, especially on the Tuesday. I'm looking to go for Ousmane Dembele as a mega differential, but if I want to play a bit safer, I think Vinicius Jr. would be next in line to take the armband. But with Dembele's form, facing Brest, who has scored 5 goals against this season, including a hat-trick early in the campaign, and by the way, their recent meeting was in February, the 1st of February, only 9 days ago at the time of this recording. So if Dembele continues this, I would back him to score a goal or two at the very least, and that's why he is my Tuesday captain right now. Now, if needed, I will move him on to Harry Kane on the Wednesday, and that could work very well, but the hope is Dembele does well enough to just stick the armband on him and gain a massive rank rise from a potential haul. But nothing is guaranteed in UCL Fantasy, and over the years, Dembele has been very inconsistent and sometimes he can leave you very frustrated, but he's got the talent, he's showing it on a consistent basis in the Champions League as well, with a hat-trick back in Matchday 8. And overall, I'm very happy with this 15-man squad. There's a few things to fine-tune perhaps, particularly with cCaFxb or Rui Patricio. Hopefully we get more clarity before the deadline. They do play early on the Wednesday, so that will help with the substitutions, but in terms of locking your team before the deadline, it's not ideal to have this sort of situation where we could see Rui Patricio start over cCaFxb despite both of them being in the Atalanta squad. So I just hope we get something concrete in terms of a quote so we can pick the right goalkeeper. I think Atalanta have the best chance of keeping a clean sheet, but that isn't actually shared by the bookmakers, as I'll show you right now. The following stats are taken from UCL_fantasy on X, so be sure to check it out. PSG are top with a 42% chance of keeping a clean sheet. We've got Juventus, Bayern Munich, Atalanta and Sporting completing the top 5, and I'll just name the rest of them in order because it basically involves every single team involved in the knockout playoff rounds. You've got AC Milan in 6th, then Monaco, Feyenoord, Man City, Benfica, Club Brugge, Borussia Dortmund, PSV, Real Madrid, Brest, and Celtic. So those are the clean sheet odds. If you disagree, I'd be very happy to see your thoughts down the comment section below. We can also discuss this in the Discord server. There is a link provided in the description, and you can always talk to me on X, Instagram, and all these social media platforms like Blue Sky, where I'm also active. But let's now head over to the goal scorer odds, assuming that these players start. Despite being top of the likely goal scorers charts, I'm looking to sell Erling Haaland. He's been very underwhelming in recent months, especially in UCL Fantasy, but apparently he's got a 48% chance of scoring against Los Merengues in that home tie, with Vlahovic, Gyökeres, Mbappe and Santiago Jimenez completing the top 5. It's worth noting that Jimenez is facing his former club in Feyenoord. He obviously featured for them this season. He scored against Bayern Munich back in Matchday 7, and for AC Milan he got an assist on his debut, and this weekend he actually came off the bench and scored in a 2-0 victory for the Rossoneri. So I think Jimenez could be an underrated shout as well. There's also the likes of Retegui, who scored 4 goals and a first half hat-trick. He has been brilliant in Serie A, with 20 goals being the highest scorer in that competition, but he hasn't replicated that too often in the Champions League. He did very well against Young Boys, but that's about it. He has blanked on multiple occasions. Then we've got Barcola, Vinicius, Guirassy, Dembele, Conrad Harder, Lookman, if he starts, which is very unlikely, Kolomuani, and other players completing the top 15. But I have to say, I'd rank Dembele higher than Barcola personally, with the amount of braces and hat-tricks Dembele is scoring at the moment, but Barcola has been in good form himself. He's very consistent and he can get goals and assists on a regular basis, but Dembele's got the highest ceiling for sure, and that completes the top 15 most likely goal scorers for Matchday 9. UCL Fantasy can always throw you surprises and some curveballs, and that's why it's worth highlighting some differentials or under-the-radar picks who can do really well if you're looking to go a bit different to your mini-league competitors or just rise the ranks with something a bit different compared to the rest of the pack. In terms of goalkeepers, I've gone for Di Gregorio and Manuel Neuer. Remember, you have to pick one goalkeeper on the Tuesday and one on the Wednesday to maximize your chance of getting points, because you can make substitutions during that window. The same goes for the captaincy. You pick a Tuesday captain first, and then for the Wednesday, you can switch it if needed. I've gone for Schlotterbeck, who plays in a very poor defense right now, but Schlotterbeck can get ball recovery points, and that's why he's not too far away from the likes of Kim Min-jae and Atalanta defenders in terms of UCL fantasy points this season. And in the last campaign, when Borussia Dortmund reached the Champions League final, Schlotterbeck was right up there as one of the highest scoring defenders in this game. I've also gone for William Baccio, who has 71 balls recovered this season. I wouldn't mind going for him and Hakimi simultaneously, but if you're asking me to pick one, I'd still go for Hakimi because of the attacking potential, but William Baccio offers great value I'm also going for Jimitsi in this alternative section. He got an assist in that 5-0 win over Hellas Verona. So if you don't want to go for Sappacosta, Hain, or maybe Carnesecchi or Rui Patricio in goal, this would be another option to consider, who's got very low ownership. Singo has 3 double-digit returns this season and 2 goals, but he has a massive doubt for Matchday 9. So this is a risky pick, but it could pay off for you. And in the same match, Otamendi has done very well in UCL Fantasy over the years, mainly due to ball recoveries, and he's got that odd goal in him from time to time, so that's not too shabby of a pick. The same goes for Di Maria in the forward line if you want to go for a differential, or Kokchu in the midfield, but I've gone for Elise and Kimmich in this position with Phil Foden, Lookman if he's available, and that could be a massive differential for those that keep him, and also Bakayoko. He is my favourite PSV asset by far, although it was Lang who scored this weekend, and he's another one that you might want to delve into potentially. As for the forwards, there are so many different options. Of course, Mbappe isn't a differential, so to speak, but he didn't feature in my own team for now, and the same goes for the best team I showed you a couple of days ago. Erling Haaland and Gyökeres are also template picks who are very strong as well, but De Ketelaere should be available for Matchday 9, and if that's the case, he is a massive differential and very cheap. He's arguably the best forward at this price and below. I mean, he certainly is actually, but in terms of budget and mid-price forwards, you're looking at 7 million and below. I think De Ketelaere is still number one. You've got Santiago Jimenez to consider and several others like Retegui. If you can translate that Serie A form into the Champions League, that could be a massive haul incoming in either Matchday 9 or 10. Rodrigo is going massively under the radar, and he might be even better than Mbappe and Vinicius Jr., so I'd still recommend him as a cheeky punt. And then Kolo Muani, who hasn't blanked for his new club Juventus with 5 goals in 3 matches. He even scored on his debut against Napoli, the league leaders of Serie A, and there are many more where that came from. If you've got any differentials or players that I haven't covered across the last couple of videos that you think will do really well, then let me know down in the comment section below. And thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for new. I promise to get this to a 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards new goals like 32,000 subscribers. Follow me on X, Instagram and Blue Sky. It's still an RCM, or in the case of Blue Sky, FPL Dylan. And be sure to join the Discord server, UCL Fantasy League. Check out my Spotify and also my Patreon and the championships for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. I wish you all the best of luck for Matchday 9 and the rest of the tournament, and I'll see you tomorrow for that deadline stream.